Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Executive Director Podcast. My name is Becky Caldwell, and I'm your host. I'm an executive coach for mission and purpose-driven leaders, and I serve as the actual executive director of the Virginia Highlands Festival in Abingdon, Virginia. I am taking a few weeks off from actively producing the podcast so that I can accept this gift of time and pause and reimagine what this podcast could be, what it can offer to you, our audience. So I invite you to take the same gift of pause. And if you would like to get in touch with me directly and work with me as your coach right now, feel free to email me, becky@virtualexecutivedirector.com, or reach out to me on any of the social media platforms that are linked in the show notes. And let's have an initial conversation, because so much is possible right now, even amidst all the restrictions. So you just need to take that time to accept it and even maybe seek what those gifts might be. And I can help you with that. So while I'm pausing the podcast, I'm going to rerun some of my favorites. It's not going off the air completely. Or should I say off the internet completely? I'm going to rerun some of my favorites that I think will help get you in this spirit of acceptance and exploration. So without further delay, here is the episode for this week. Hello and welcome to the Virtual Executive Director Podcast. My name is Becky Caldwell. I'm an executive coach for nonprofit and mission-driven leaders. I am also the actual executive director of the Virginia Highlands Festival in Abingdon, Virginia. This week on the podcast, I interview Rachel Fowler, and we talk about how to carry your experience with you. And what does that mean? At its most basic level, it means how to identify your transferable skills when you are looking at shifting careers, shifting industries, maybe shifting from for-profit into nonprofit or vice versa. And here's why this is important. I'm seeing a lot of transition right now in our industry, maybe it's just the community that I'm in. There's a lot of transition happening in my community. And I also hear from a lot of people who feel stuck in their current employment situation, and they're not quite sure how to get out of it. My hope for you is that this conversation with Rachel is empowering as much as it is educational, that you are not stuck. You can dislodge yourself from a bad employment situation, and we are going to show you how. So why is Rachel so awesome? Okay, first of all, she is an actor, director, producer. She has made a transition herself from acting and directing into executive coaching, and has learned how to apply her transferable skills of being an actor and a director to the coaching process for somebody. In this conversation, we talk about not only how to identify your transferable skills, but also we talk about listening and why it's helpful to have a coach or another human being to reflect things back to you and ask you the hard questions. We talk about how people get stuck, how you can get unstuck. We talk about the ability to reframe something. And this is a conversation that is going to be great for interns and volunteers as well, because we talk about specifically addressing interns and volunteers who are sort of volunteering because they're in transition and need something to occupy them while they're transitioning. We talk specifically to you about how to make sure that your experience with the organization is transferable into whatever happens next. We have book recommendations, so many things. Like we just talked for a very long time. And I think it shows in, this is probably the longest episode I've put out in all of my 122 episodes so far. But Rachel is also an old friend. And it was so great to get to talk with her like we did when we first met in college. We were both theater majors at Northwestern. And it was like no time had passed. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you too.
I still consider myself an actor and a director and a beginner filmmaker, as well as an executive coach. I would call myself an executive coach, though I'll coach anybody who wants coaching, to be honest. And I really find that the lens of theater and the artistic lens of storytelling is super useful with the executive coaching. So I don't know if that's such a great introduction or if that's just like the seed I'm planting for the rest of the conversation.
Well, we're going to talk about how to carry your experience with you through the years, because we will all have multiple jobs. I mean, most of us will have multiple jobs throughout our career. And I think we're looking for not just the next job or the next rung of whatever perceived ladder we've made for ourselves, but for new experiences to add to our lives. And so being able to go from one type of job to another type of job is something that you've become an expert in. And that's why we're having this conversation recorded instead of just, the two of us chit-chatting like we do.
Yeah.
And that's the value I think we're going to bring to my audience who, so people listen to this podcast in preparation for a new executive director job or job interview. I've had that feedback, which is exciting. And people listen to this if they're sick of it and they're ready to do something else. If they've had like their last crappy board meeting and they're like, I'm done. How can I make my life better and still be mission driven? So let's talk about that moment when you were like, I love acting and I love theater, but I need to do this other thing now too.
It happened a little bit more organically than that, actually. So I moved to London about 4.5 years ago for my husband's job. He got this amazing opportunity, and we decided to uproot ourselves from Denver, where we had a really beautiful community. I had like my tribe, my theater tribe, and came here with our daughter. And getting here, I sort of hit the ground running, got an agent within a month of moving here. How does that happen? That doesn't happen ever.
Because you are amazing, but
and I found that being an American here in the UK is very, very different. And I'm very, very niche. So the opportunities are very, very niche. And a friend of mine from Colorado had actually introduced me to someone who has his own coaching company here. His name's Richard Hollow. And the company is called Dramatic Resources. And he and Jeff Church started this company. They used to teach at the National Theater in the education department and started this company doing corporate training using the lens of theater. And I met with him and he asked me if I would be interested in doing this. And I was like, yes, absolutely. And went to a couple of workshops with him and his company, and they brought me on board. And sort of in true fashion, just, leapt the big leap of faith on my part, to see that I could do it.
Yeah.
Because it felt so completely foreign
Mm-hmm.
and yet not.
So what were the ways that it felt completely foreign to what you were
My,
doing as a theater director and actor?
my audience.
Mm.
Right. So the people that I was working with who had no theater lingo, no theater experience. And when I would come in and work with a group of people, for instance, I worked on sort of a Shark Tank type conference where we would go in and coach a group of 6 to 8 people on a group presentation on something that they were a new app that they were developing that they were hoping would get funded.
Mm.
And I would come in and be like, okay, so they have they see the theater, they see the actor, and they immediately go, I'm not an actor. I can't do that. I can't do that.
Uh-huh.
And my having to come to it saying, I'm not expecting you to be an actor. I actually am going to remind you of things that you've forgotten and that you
Oh, I love
probably
it.
haven't put into play in a while because somebody told you that corporate presence looks like this,
Mm.
or that you need to behave this way, or a presentation has to have 40 PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to shake it all up, and we're going to get back down to basics, and we're going to play.
I love it. So,
It's
okay, so then how is it similar?
it's similar in that I am giving direction,
Mm-hmm.
and getting people to, I think in anything, the thing that I love about coaching, which is acting 101,
Mm.
is listening. And regardless of what you're doing, whether you are presenting to people or you're delivering hard feedback or receiving hard feedback or team building or project managing or leading, if you don't listen, you can't do it.
Mm.
You can't do it. And people think that they're listening, but most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, people are figuring out what they're going to say.
Yes.
And you can't figure out what you're going to say and listen at the same time.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
is that, do you think?
I think we get anxious.
Mm.
So we want people to think that we're smart. We want people to trust us. We want people to believe us. We want people to like us. And by putting ourselves out there, we are putting ourselves out to be judged. And so we want to be brilliant. We want to be all of those things. And so all of the focus goes here into us.
Mm.
And when the focus goes in, you can't listen. And so, as an acting, as you know, the whole way that you authentically recreate behavior to make it seem like it's happening for the first time is by forgetting yourself and throwing all of your attention onto your partner so that you can get that gleam in their eyes. You can see the smirk that happens, the twitch or whatever, and react to it in the moment. I think it also takes a lot more energy than people think it does. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to listen.
Mm.
And I think it's actually, it creates a beautiful space of vulnerability that some people are quite uncomfortable with because there's going to be silence.
Oh,
There's going to be a great deal of silence,
yeah.
so, and silence is really powerful. You do your best thinking when it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So how do we, as I jump in with a question, right? How, like, oh my God, dead air. How do we get comfortable with silence?
I think practice.
And so how would you work with someone to help them practice this?
So some of it is okay, let me backtrack.
Okay.
I think it would depend on what I'm coaching them on.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm coaching them on, for instance, giving a presentation, some of that learning to be silent and still are sort of really practical skills that can be honed and learned. There are a series of exercises you can do in terms of eye contact. I make eye contact with one pair of eyes, speak for a thought, zip my lips, move to a new pair of eyes, speak for a thought. You create silence by moving from one pair of eyes to another pair of eyes in silence.
Mm.
If it's more leadership, I would encourage them through some modeling. So one of the people I really, some of my coaching, my one-on-one sort of life business coaching training is based on is a woman named Nancy Klein, who wrote a book called Time to Think.
Mm.
And one of the first exercises that we did in this coaching course, which, was sort of mind-blowing to all of us, was we coached each other for 20 minutes apiece. And the coach said, I am here to hold the space for your best thinking. What would you like to think about today? And then the coach said nothing for the next 20 minutes.
Wow.
And just holds the space,
Yeah.
gives the attention, but literally says nothing. No reaction, just positive regard, holding that space and letting that person think.
Oh, wow.
And it's super scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a way to blossom creativity, problem solving, when you have no interruptions and you're just allowed to think. And because you've got someone witnessing this and holding that space and giving you their energy, it's really pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So giving them an opportunity to feel that on the receiving end, having somebody give them that attention, give them that space, give them that silence, they then know how to possibly do that for someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they feel how good that feels. And we like to repeat what feels good.
We do.
So I could get addicted to silence.
I do love it. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. We lead such noisy lives. And it's really great. It's pretty great.
So you essentially use all of your theater skills in coaching people who have no theater experience. They don't work in a theater. They're not actors, but we all have to present something at some point in our work lives, whether it's a job interview or part of your job to do PowerPoints and whatever you end up doing.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear to see how that transfers from your training as an actor to this coaching scenario. Now, how would a quote normal person, because you are extraordinary, how would a regular extraordinary person do this in their lives? Like, how do we? I don't know if you need me to provide like a scenario or if you have something in mind, but how do I look at what I've been doing the last several years and apply that to a new type of job or a new experience that I want to bring into my life?
One of the things that I like doing with my my clients, this is a great confidence exercise too, as well as sort of identifying identifying what you're really good at. It's to sort of walk a career timeline.
Okay.
And one of the things that I do is I actually will get into a place where we can stand up and walk it together, rather than sitting across from one another at a desk, with pens and paper and doing it on paper, because that's so familiar to us that it can sometimes feel a little stagnant. So by standing up and getting them to talk through, say, 3 major achievements in their career. And you say, okay, we're going to walk to the first achievement, and you take a step forward and you get them to describe what the achievement is and reflect back to them what they're saying. So, like, say somebody is like, oh, I started a business and I did this and I had a certain number of sales and then I sold it for a profit and blah, 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 blah. So you reflect back to them what they've said, and then maybe ask open-ended questions like, what did you learn? What did you bring to it that made it a success? What did you do wrong? And how did you address that? And then, get them to sort of identify those things. Great. When they're sort of exhausted with that achievement, you move on to the next one. Okay, tell me about this one. And then get them to look back on their first achievement from their second achievement and say, so what happened in between? And what did you bring from that to here? What did you carry with you that made you successful the second time? And then what did you learn? How did you fail? How did you succeed? Blah, blah, blah. Again, ask those questions and go on to the third one, have them do the same thing, and then reflect back on 1 and 2. What did you bring from these into 3? And sort of, then you can get them to sort of say, okay, these are the things. And those are the things that you wind up sort of writing down as a list. These are your skills. These are the things that you're expert at.
I love it. I love the physicality of it. Like, you think differently when you're in motion.
And moving from one to another and then turning back to look at it. Look at the one that you're not in anymore.
Yeah.
Really, it changes your perspective so that you're looking on it as something that's past, as opposed to standing in it and being in the present. Again, an actor. It's a little bit of an actor thing, right?
Right.
Using your imagination to relive the achievement, and then when you're looking back on it to reflect on it, and you wind up using slightly different language than you do when you're sort of in the thick of it.
Yeah. What has been the biggest, I guess, aha moment from someone you've worked with? Can you describe it?
Yeah. So a lot of the coaching that I love doing, and it's a really simple thing. It's a simple thing to coach, I should say. It's not such a simple thing to process. I do, through Dramatic Resources, I do this 2-day leadership workshop for women in a big tech company. And on the first day, we talk a lot about voice and body. And, again, these are things that I feel like I'm reminding people of, reminding to engage their body, reminding to engage their voice. Yeah. And in the afternoon, we work on their presentation skills under the context of them sort of promoting themselves at work, having an elevator pitch with somebody who might be somebody they can network with, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sort of rehearsing what that might look like. And this woman got up, beautiful woman, gorgeous. And she got up and she was like, so, when I was 28, I was a managing director at Morgan Stanley and married to my husband. And I was one of the youngest MDs ever at Morgan Stanley. And then we got married and decided to have children. And I stayed at home. And my husband's career took off. And while I was home with my children, I got to spend time with them. And I started a business because I felt like I really needed to do something. And my husband's career kept going. And then I sold it. And then I started this other business. And then I sold that. And now I'm here at this company. And my husband's career is like miles ahead of mine. And I'm feeling old and I'm really frustrated.
Wow.
Like everything about her was just so, you could tell she was just so, I think, hurt by this. And the rest of us who were watching her were like, you know, our jaws were on the floor. We're like,
wait, you built and sold a business?
I know. So I looked at her and I said, I just want to, for a second, tell you your story. So instead of reflecting back to her what she, you know, exactly what she had said, you know,
Right.
and I said to her, I was like, I want to tell you about this amazing woman. This woman, she currently is a managing director at this tech company, but this is her fourth career. Her first career was at Morgan Stanley, and then she had 2 beautiful children and made the hard choice to stay home. But she got to have some wonderful time being there with her children. But she didn't sit idly by. She started a company. And it was so successful, she sold it for a profit. And then she started another company and sold that for a profit. And then her children were a little bit older and they didn't need her so much. And so she decided to go back to work. And her eyes, like you could tell, like some of that sort of hurt and anger started to drain from her body. Yeah. And the rest of the group was like, yeah.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is empowering.
Oh, she was smiling. And she was like, oh my God, I forget that there's another way to look at this. And I was like, this is your story. I'm telling your story.
Yeah. You didn't make anything up.
I didn't. No. I'm like, you have accomplished so much. And maybe it's not what you thought was going to happen when you were 28. And yes, your husband had the advantage of never having a break in his career. And guess who got to stay home with the kids? Mm-hmm. And guess who got to do this? And guess who got to do this?
Yes. That power of reframing, I think, is so significant that you were able to. So how do we bring that power in? Like, what if I don't have Rachel to help me do this?
I think it's as simple as trying to, as acknowledging what you're feeling, right? Like I didn't want to not acknowledge that she was clearly frustrated. And clearly there were some negative emotions that surrounded her career. I'm like, all of those things are true. I'm not trying to negate those. But if you can't, or I should say, and, because but is one of those slightly negative words, right? Yeah. And if you can say, yes, I'm frustrated, etc., and I'm going to put that frustration down and look at this from a different angle. You know, again, physically,
like right now, okay, those of you listening can't see this because we're on a Zoom video call, but Rachel is literally shifting position in her seat.
Yeah. But literally, I mean, sometimes you actually physically have to do it.
Yeah.
And if you can use language that is positive, focus on the positive parts of it instead of the negative parts, because we all know the negatives, like this, you know, downward spiral that once you get on it, it's really hard to get off.
Yeah.
But when you and yes and yourself and say, yes, and I did that. And I made that choice. And here are the consequences of that choice. And there are some really beautiful consequences. And there are some frustrations. Yes. And mostly there are beautiful consequences to it.
Yeah. Just that switch from I had to stay home to I get to stay home.
Yeah.
Is very powerful. I mean, that's something that, so when I talk about cultural transformation, that was the first thing I did at my current organization. Was when I walked in, the board presidents, I was like, what's your vision? And they said, our vision is to get through the festival. I'm like, well, that sounds like a blast. I can't wait to attend the Get Through It festival. I'm sure thousands of people are lining up for the Get Through It festival, but we get to instead of we have to.
Yeah.
And just
that kind of language seeps through into everything you do.
Yeah.
So if to get through the festival is the attitude of the people who are putting it on, then it's going to feel like that to the people who come
It
through.
did. It was a slog of a summer.
Yeah.
But we changed that. I mean, and it starts, and it doesn't have to be like a massive, okay, everyone, this is what we're going to do now. Just starts with one person changing how they talk about things, and suddenly it's a little bit contagious and people pick up on it.
Yeah. And it's not a tectonic shift.
Yeah, exactly. It's more evolution than revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually a pretty small change that reverberates really powerfully. It's the ripple effect. It's the tiny pebble that then ripples through the entire body of water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do some people get stuck in this process? Where do they get stuck?
In the process of
reframing what they do now into what they could possibly do somewhere else.
Gosh, that feels like that's such an individual thing. I think I know that I get stuck personally.
Let's talk about you.
Yeah, let's talk about me.
That's why you're here.
I actually was just talking to a friend of mine today, and both of us were feeling a little like frustrated with our inertia. And for both of us, I would say it was, it's in part because we're standing somewhere and we have a choice to make and we can't choose. So you're standing at a crossroads and you're like, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here, I could go here. I've got like five options. And you spend so much time thinking through each of the option, the pros and cons, blah, 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 that suddenly you have a headache and decision fatigue and you're like, oh, I'll think about it tomorrow. And then you come back tomorrow and you're still at the same crossroads. Now, it may be that you're more excited about one way than another this time, and you're still trying to weigh the pros and cons of everything. So I think we sometimes get stuck. I know that I can get stuck when I look at the problem as being this enormous thing that has to get done, or I look at the decision as that it's this enormous sort of abstract thing. And for me, I tried to come back to, what do I want? Where do I want to spend my time? And for me, my time is a commodity that, I mean, it's, everybody says it's our most valuable commodity because you can't get it back. When I think about my time, it's also whatever I'm choosing to do is potentially time away from my family. time away from an artistic endeavor, time away from building my coaching business. There are a lot of things that the time becomes contextual. And when I can think about what I want and what I'm passionate about and how I want to spend my spirit, my time, my energy, that usually kicks my butt a little bit.
It helps clarify.
Yeah, I'm going to choose this path.
Now, what if someone doesn't know what they want? I mean, I would say you are blessed with a level of self-awareness that a lot of people don't have. And that a lot of that comes from, I mean, just who you are as a person, but also actor training, because
Totally.
I mean, you just have to.
Know thyself.
Yeah, exactly. So what if someone doesn't have the benefits of A, being you, and B, having gone through, an acting class? How can they figure out what they want?
Get a coach. They can hire me. They can hire you.
No, right? I agree. Actually, yes. I'm so glad you said that, because I think the power of having a coach is that power of reflection, that you put something out there and you need a human to reflect it back to you.
Mm-hmm. And a human sometimes to ask you the question that you should be asking yourself, but don't want to.
Oh gosh, yes. Yes.
So that is something that I find really powerful with coaching, is to ask that question, because it's there.
Uh-huh.
And it sits uncomfortably, or it sits between you and your coachee. And then say it out loud, and the coachee's like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I knew you were going to ask that question. And then they may not have an answer, but once the question's out there and voiced,
yeah.
harder to ignore.
Yes.
Much harder.
Do you find that do you have like an arsenal of questions that you kind of pull from, or do you find that every situation is different?
Every situation is different. I really try for open-ended questions to get the person talking. A lot of it for me is trying to understand and to help them understand, because they are having to articulate what's happening to them.
Yeah.
Or what their dilemma is. And when you have to articulate it, it's not so abstract anymore.
Yeah.
I think we can hold these really complicated and very abstract thoughts in our head. And as soon as we need to communicate them and translate them into language, some of the unknown becomes known, and there's nuance that comes out in the language that people use. And my job as a coach is to also pick up on that nuance. If they say, I feel defeated, tell me about that. What does that mean to you?
Yes.
I feel shackled. What does that mean to you? How are you shackled? Who's shackling you? So sort of picking up on the way that they're describing things and getting them to expand on it. Because they may be feeling something and it's coming out in language, and they don't know that that's what's happening. So that's our job to reflect, to say, you're using this word. That's a really interesting word for you to be using. Why are you using that word?
Yeah. And they're like, I don't know.
Well, they have to think about it then, and in the end, I think the beautiful thing about coaching is all of us in any relationship we have, we want to be seen and we want to be heard. And through the act of being seen and being heard, we're understood. And having somebody who is actively listening and reflecting back and asking these hard questions, we get the sense that we're seen, heard, and understood. And hopefully we understand ourselves better than we did at the beginning of this session.
Yeah. And then we can go on to be our very best selves.
Yeah. So this was another one of my coaching clients who's still one of my clients. He's an amazing, amazing young man. And the first time that we met, he kept telling me, well, I don't do this because I don't do this certain thing because I'm bored, because I'm lazy. And I, like, some of the language that he was using, I was like, you're not lazy. You're not lazy. What is that? Tell me about that. And eventually it came out that he was scared to put in too much effort. He was scared. He was scared that he wouldn't be good enough. And I was like, oh man, no, let's work on that. Let's work on that. Yeah. I was like, that's very different than being lazy.
Yeah.
Very different than being lazy.
Let's kind of flip this around just a little bit. How do we, as the leader of our organization or department or whatever, help our employees, our volunteers, our interns, just anyone who works sort of for us or with us? How do we help them recognize their unique gifts that they can then take to someplace else? Because, I mean, if I get, whenever I get an intern, I have them for a few months and then they graduate and move on to something else amazing. So how can I help them in this process?
Well, I'm going to flip that back on you because I've never had an intern. So how do you deal with your interns when you've got somebody coming in for a couple of months?
Or a volunteer. Because I mean, we get volunteers who are in transition and they don't, like, they've left a job or got laid off and just need to fill the time until they find something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let's just come up with something right now, because we could come up with something really helpful.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that some of it goes back to, like, really listening. So with an intern, for instance, when they come in, sure, they've got a job to do, which presumably your organization has a need for an intern because you have a need to have something done.
Mm-hmm.
And before they start, to have a conversation with them and say, what do you want to get out of this internship?
Yes.
And
what do they want and need?
Yeah. What do they want and need? What are they hoping to learn when they, because they are also, presumably, most internships, I think, are unpaid. So it's kind of like a volunteer as well.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to walk away saying, that was time well spent.
Yes.
I learned so much, and I am so glad I spent 3 months interning for Becky at this festival because I learned how to do all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a chance for them to reflect on what they want, and a chance for you to find out what they want and to help offer that to them in addition to whatever it is, that whatever need they're filling as well.
Yeah. I mean, it really does come back to listening.
Yeah. That's to me is the biggest difference between a leader and a manager. And I think that a lot of leaders can be really good managers. Not all good managers are good leaders. Managers have to be very practical, very deadline driven, make sure that everything is getting done in a timely manner, efficiently and accurately and well done. Whereas a leader is going to have a little bit more vision. Both of them need to be good listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them really need to be good listeners. And really, but I think that a leader is really going to take the time to get to know what the other person wants and needs too.
Yeah.
That it's not just about their vision and about getting that accomplished, it's also about saying you're a part of this and you should get something out of it too, not just a salary or whatever, if we're
Exactly.
creating something together, then yeah.
I love that idea of co-creating, that just because you're the person kind of at the top of the pyramid or the food chain or whatever metaphor you want to use, you require everyone underneath you to be able to do your job really well and to fulfill the mission of the organization.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, we are co-creating with our direct reports, with our interns and with our volunteers. And the more we as leaders can see that and not see, well, this is my domain and here's how we're going to do everything.
Yeah. And you
That's
create the circumstances under which they can all shine.
yes.
I think about a theater company, right? An artistic director doesn't necessarily need to know a whole lot about costume design or set design, but they need to know how to create an atmosphere where a person can do really good costume design and really
Yes.
good set design, so that whenever all of those elements come together, it's a beautiful show. It's a well executed show. It's, there are all of these moving pieces that if you don't create a good environment for everyone to really do their best, then you're not going to get the best.
Yeah. And that is really the role of the leader, isn't it? I mean, beyond listening, it's creating the environment where people can thrive and where
Yeah.
the organization can grow and be sustainable.
Yeah.
That environmental impact is that's so much more important. I'm thinking back to an episode a couple months ago with Trey Ashley Guerin, and we talked about this very thing, this idea that it's not your job as a leader isn't necessarily like cause and effect. It's more creating an ecosystem where things can happen.
Yeah.
For your organization is an organism, and it's your job to provide it what it needs to grow. You can't grow it. Like you don't grow you don't stick leaves on a branch and call it a tree. You plant the seed and give it what it needs to grow. I think that's what you do as a coach too, Ray, is that people come to you lacking confidence, feeling frustrated, stuck, and you give them the care and feeding and the sunlight and the water that they need to grow themselves, to figure out their path. Your ability to listen and pluck out what's really going on with them is extraordinary. And that's because you're such a freaking great actor and a director.
Oh, thank you so much. Can I have you in my head all the time? All of those wonderful things.
Save this part, bookmark this part of the podcast, and listen to it whenever you need to pick me up. But, to everyone listening, that's really what you want out of a coach. You don't want someone who's going to solve your problem for you, because that's not helping you. That's just codependency. You want someone who will for your session create the environment where you are free to explore and craft your own solution, but you can't do it without that environment that's created by your coach.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that people are their own experts.
Yes.
And if they have a dilemma or a decision that needs to be made or a problem that they need to contend with, they are the ones who have the best and the right solution. No one else. So it's creating that environment in which that solution can come out.
Yes.
And it feels actionable as opposed to scary or whatever.
Right. Or as opposed to, can we just put a moratorium? Everyone who's listening, if you find yourself saying this phrase, I want you to slap yourself in the face and never do it again. You know what you should do? If that ever comes out of your mouth, just stop what you're doing, slap yourself in the face, and apologize to the person you're standing in front of. You know what you should do? Or the corollary to that is, why don't you just
Yeah. I think sometimes those things, I know, like my mother, I'm going to bring up my mom, whom I absolutely adore. My mom, it wants to fix things. So
Yes.
whenever I talk to her about something or whatnot, she says those things, but it's coming from a place of love as a suggestion to fix it.
Yeah.
She wants it to be fixed,
Yes.
and it's not always useful.
Right. I think a lot of us want to fix it. A lot of us leaders want to fix it. Someone comes to you and they have a problem. You're like, well, here's what you do. You just da 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 da.
Yeah.
That's not going to help them the next time the problem comes up and you're not there.
No, it's
Tell
too
them what to do.
directive.
Yeah.
It's totally too directive.
We have veered wildly off transferable skills and how to carry your experience with. Actually, maybe not how to carry your experience with you.
Yeah.
I
No,
think all of it's related.
I think it is too. And I think it all comes back to that real basic thing of listening,
Mm-hmm. And
seeking
holding space.
understanding,
Yeah.
which you can only do by listening. You can't understand if you won't listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find, I'm going to ask you a question now.
Okay.
Do you find when you're coaching on culture in particular, what do you find to be the most useful things when you go into an organization and are working with them to change or tweak their culture or enrich their culture?
Oh, yeah. The thing I always hone in on first is the one person who you can actually do something about, which is yourself. So usually when I'm brought in, it's this board member always does blah, 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 or this staff member always undermines me, or this person doesn't do their job. And yeah, exactly. Always pointing to someone else. And my my first question is always, well, what are you doing to make that possible for them? What kind of environment have you set up where that's okay?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to think about.
That's one of those hard questions that we coaches have to ask
Yeah,
because they know that question is there, but they're not willing to ask it of themselves.
exactly.
Else to say non-judgmentally,
Yeah.
right? There's no judgment. It's just saying, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Because you can't change them. If someone keeps missing deadlines, your manipulation of the deadline will never help them meet a deadline.
Yeah.
And if a board member is micromanaging you inappropriately, I mean, all micromanagement is inappropriate, but if a board member is inappropriately like trying to manage what you do day to day, I mean, what ammunition are you giving them to make them think that that's okay? Or what is your relationship with your board president that they're not standing up for you to this person? What are you we can only affect ourselves, really. We can only
Yeah.
change ourselves. And that's why I always also start with language. Like, well, what language are you using to describe things? And if you're using consistently negative or defeatist, or there's always a way to reframe, to shift the lens so that you can present more positively. It doesn't mean having filters on that so that you only see the good and not
No.
acknowledging challenges. But I mean, it just makes a huge difference in how someone approaches something. I mean, there's a book, The Happiness Advantage, and in it, the author, whose name I can't remember right now, is that Sean Acor, maybe? But they talk about the research that shows that we are successful because we're happy. We are not happy because we are successful. Happiness comes before success. And when we're happy, we make better decisions. And so why not? Why would you not want to create an environment of happiness, even if what you do is difficult?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of where I start with
That's
culture.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when you're working with people, are you finding a lot of insecurity?
I find I've worked predominantly with women, not by design, really. It's been more by circumstance. I think in part because of, this one particular program that I do with Dramatic Resources that is specifically leadership with women, a leadership. I find that women are complicated. So sometimes there is that insecurity, and sometimes there's defensiveness, arrogance, behaving in a manner that feels very male to succeed. And there are also quite a few women that I have coached who really struggle with what they want versus what they think they should want.
Ooh.
Which is a really, it's one that I struggle with this all the time too. That should is such an interesting word.
Right?
Yeah, because it implies that there is a right way to do something. There is a right thing to want. And who determined that?
Yeah. Who made that rule?
Who made that? So like I'm thinking about this one woman in particular that I coached in this program. And when we did the, promote your role, she got up there and she said, I don't want to promote my role. I like the job that I'm in. I love my work-life balance. I have an extremely good relationship with my husband and with my children, and I do charity work and yoga stuff on the side. I don't want any more responsibility. I don't want to be a leader in this company. So I don't want to promote myself with the idea that I'm going to get another job and get a promotion. I don't want that. She's weeping as she was saying that, because she was like, they keep sending me on these programs. I keep being nominated and I don't know how to say no. That's not what I want, because they keep saying, well, surely you want a promotion because you should.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, her level of self-awareness is
self-awareness to be like, it's not what I want. And not the confidence to say to the higher ups who keep nominating her for these leadership workshops and hoping that she's going to move on, to say, thank you, but no.
Yeah.
I'm good. And
Yeah, that's such a
Can I
key.
answer your question? I don't know if I answered.
Yeah. That insecure. I think that insecurity about, what we want versus what we should want. And being able to stand in our truth. A lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
With standing in their truth and being okay with it. Because we're just fed like so many lies about what we should want or what should be. We should all over ourselves.
Yeah. We've got some
a big pile of should.
Really pretty powerful constructs that we're operating within.
Yeah.
So some of it is like, if I'm going against the norm, if I'm going against the wave of lemmings that are running in one direction, it's uncomfortable, it's vulnerable. And I think that a lot of people would probably not want to run off the cliff with the lemmings. They'd probably be like, hey, I'm actually good over here.
Yeah.
Munching on some grass. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's wrap this up. And
that went by so fast.
I know, it's been an hour, about an hour. I know, like, I could talk to you forever. So one of my greatest memories, I'm going to leave this in the podcast too. One of my greatest memories from college is how, for me, college felt like the first time someone treated my passion as like a real thing, like, oh, of course you are going to be late with your midterm because it's tech week. And that's your thing, is you're majoring in theater.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a time, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but it was you and me and like the guy who always smelled like patchouli. And
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about? I can't remember his name. And someone else who we were friends with, and we were in like the common room of your dorm suite, and we were just having the most intense, like, intellectual discussion about art. And I don't remember like what facet of it or anything. I just remember that I was in a room with people who cared so passionately and so deeply about the same thing that I did. And it was endlessly like motivating and affirming, and just that ability. I guess we were sort of holding space for each other before that became a term. And yes, anding each other. And it was just like a magical defining moment
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
in my life. And I don't even remember what we were talking about. It was just the fact that we were.
Yeah. And we understood each other.
Yes.
We heard each other. We saw each other. And we understood each
Yes.
other.
And so in many ways, it makes perfect sense that we've both taken this path to be coaches while we're still practicing
Mm-hmm.
our creative lives.
Yeah.
I think that is one way that we can carry our experience with us, is that we don't have to just leave it behind. If we change careers, or it's more like we add on careers, I think, as we go. And it was just so beautiful the way you described how you literally walk someone through their achievements and then look back and are able to bring those elements step by step into the present, and then into their potential future
Yeah.
with whatever they do next. I love it. I love it so
Oh,
much, Ray. Thank you for sharing that with us.
thanks for
Thank
having me on
you.
the podcast.
So how can people get more of you? Because they are going to want to. And look, if you guys don't realize it right now, listen to this again and you're going to want more of Rachel Fowler. I just promise.
My website is under construction, so I can't
Okay.
give you a URL, but you can email me
Okay.
at Rachel Fowler Filmmaker at gmail.com.
And filmmaker has 2 M's in there?
Yes.
Okay. I will put this in the show notes. Also, do you have a LinkedIn presence?
I do.
Okay.
I can shoot you that
Great.
link over
All
as
right.
well.
So we'll do a LinkedIn link and your email. If you want to contact Rachel for some coaching of your own, she is available. Even though she lives in the UK, she's available worldwide.
I am.
And if you are stuck with because of inertia, or if you are stuck because you are shooting all over yourself, if you are looking for whatever the next chapter of your life experience is going to be, she is a great resource to get you to the next step. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Becky.
Hey everyone, thank you so much again for listening this week. Remember to share this with a colleague or friend who you think might benefit from the info. And if you'd like to reach me directly, email me, Becky at virtualexecutivedirector.com, or follow me and DM me on Instagram, where I am at virtual_exec, or at Becky Brett Caldwell if you like a little more sass in your support every day. Remember, everybody, we shine brighter when we shine together.